Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Today I'm going to respond to a recent scientific study that claims there is a link between people who love astrology and narcissism, as well as being unintelligent. This is a study that a number of people sent me. I must have gotten a dozen different people on Instagram, the YouTube comment section, private email through the website, etc., that said, hey, check out this article. What do you think about this? Could you address this? In specifically, some people asked if I would address this in my Sunday bonus content. So I took a look at it and I thought, yeah, this would make, I think, a really nice piece of content to explore this article, to explore its claims, and try to respond thoughtfully, not just, I mean, it's easy when you read something like this and you are someone who loves astrology to become really defensive or reactionary, just have a knee-jerk reaction, they don't understand or something. But to take some time trying to understand this study was the goal of my work in this episode, and to craft a meaningful response. I'm going to tell you about the study, where you can find it, where you can learn more about it. And then I have something a little special, a little bit different today. I created a spoken word meditation. I am a writer. I went to did a master's degree and then a Master of Fine Arts degree in creative writing. I'm just finishing a book. I'm in the process of editing, and I've been writing several guided meditations for Kickstarter awards. And so I thought, I've been kind of in the mood to write lately. So I actually wrote a response to this article and tried to craft it as a kind of meditation. And I'm going to share that with you today, because what it represents is really me sitting with this study, its results, its claims, and responding to it from my heart. And for me, that often takes the place of writing. Writing plays that role in my life. It plays a role of processing and reflection. It lets me spread out within an issue. And I find that exercise for me often grants me more than just a black or white way of thinking about something or processing something in my life. Writing about things gives me a chance to kind of spread out within an issue. I think journaling is like that. For many of you, I'm sure journaling plays that role. So I'm sure what I'm talking about here is, familiar to a lot of you. Anyway, so I'm going to read you what I wrote. But first, let me just show you the study. Here is the abstract of the study here. And you'll see here, you can see the abstract. Even the stars think that I am superior. Personality, intelligence, and belief in astrology. And it goes on through the abstract and the introduction and so forth to describe the study. And I would highly recommend, if you're the kind of person who likes this kind of thing or wants to understand more of where these researchers were coming from, that you read it. I think you'll find, even just in reading it, that it won't bother you as much as the headline bothers you. But anyway, scroll to the bottom, get to the results and the discussion, limitations, conclusion. Our aim with the present study was to contribute to an increased understanding of individual differences and unfounded epistemic beliefs, such as belief in astrology. The results showed, interestingly, that narcissism was the strongest predictor of belief in astrology. So the headlines are saying that personality, intelligence, and belief are sort of negatively correlated for people who are into astrology. Do a quick Google search and you'll find Science Direct, Side Post, Psychology Today, and a variety of other websites now carrying this story. And obviously they're distributing it. And so astrologers, very similarly, back under the lunar eclipse in September, faced some, the zodiac sign has changed, and there was another sociologist attacking astrology. I think that part of this is the result of moving into a new era astrologically, the Pluto in Aquarius era, the Uranus in Gemini era, where questions about what is real, what is true, questions about artificial intelligence, questions about epistemology, what is truth, what is reality, are going to reach into some new territory. We shouldn't expect less from powerful outer planets moving into air signs. And I have long said on the channel that I believe studying astrology right now is auspicious. Obviously pumping the tires on our own programs, right? But I really genuinely believe it from the standpoint of, um, Uranus and Pluto trining one another from Gemini to Aquarius over the next few years is probably going to mark a rising tide of interest in astrology. Very similar to the way that yoga slowly came into the West and then became more prolific, and it now everyone, like, there's no guy at my gym who hasn't done yoga, who may not have really any spiritual commitments at all. But yoga, a lot of the language of presence, of mindfulness, of breath, of flexibility, of meditation are now commonplace, even if they're just being taught as corporate tools for success. Um, and that we shouldn't expect that it would be any different for a spiritual paradigm to not be sort of co-opted by other forces at work in a society that may not have the strongest spiritual compass or orientation in the first place. But nonetheless, it's still, as someone who owned a yoga studio for almost a decade, I think it's a positive thing that yoga has had positive effects, even if, a lot of people have taken it and not quite embodied it in the way that I think it was intended to be. And astrology is very similar. And we're living, I think, in an era where the rising interest in astrology is just going to increase. Its popularity is going to increase. And so too will an awareness and conversation about what is astrology? What is the underlying epistemology? Can we trust this? Is this real? Is it confirmation bias? And then questions about the shadows may come up, like, well, is it just a bunch of new age, narcissistic, unintelligent people? Which frankly, many more rationally minded people have leveled the same charge at lots of religious and spiritual traditions. And to be fair, there is a way in which many mystical and spiritual traditions, religious traditions, can be utilized in ways that are narrow-minded, unintelligent, unimaginative, self-centered. I mean, how many people go to church just to petition God for things they want and avoiding things they don't want? There's not a lot of intelligence or depth behind that. And yet, that's been a part of faith traditions for thousands of years on the planet. There's all different levels at which we engage with things. So with all of that in mind, I think it's important to consider studies like these deeply. Don't get too triggered by them, but take them in and then, work with them, work them open, expand within them and see what we find, see what we can learn. So on that note, what I'd like to do now is read you something that I wrote. I want to begin with the most disarming answer I can give. Is it true? Are people who are interested in astrology more likely to be unintelligent and narcissistic? Let's start with the most disarming answer. Is it true? Yes. I have to tell you, at first glance, I nodded my head. 16 years in professional astrology will do that to you. I felt strangely seen and validated, and at the same time, when I read this study, misunderstood, held, and misheld, accurately observed, and profoundly mischaracterized. Because I have witnessed narcissism in this field. I have seen a lack of intellectual depth. I have watched people consume astrology in ways that make me wince. Let me start with the simplest example I know, one I've experienced more times than I can count. I'm teaching a technical concept or an ancient philosophical idea, and I say clearly, we'll take questions at the end. Please keep your questions about the techniques or the philosophy. Please don't ask about your own birth chart today. And then the Q&A opens. And someone immediately unmutes and says, so what does this mean in my chart? Sometimes the question isn't even related to the day's topic. Mars retrograde in their 7th house, despite the fact that we've been talking about triplicity rulers or house lord relationships or benefic malefic conditions. It happens so often that it becomes almost unbelievable. But here's the deeper truth. Modern astrology has become inseparable from self-help. Everything we learn immediately gets funneled into the question, what does this say about me? Or what could this do for me? It's understandable. It's human. But it also reveals a shadow, a kind of self-involvement, a knee-jerk narcissism that's baked into the culture. It's not just students, our practitioners contribute too. We have lost so much of our textual tradition, so much of the philosophical backbone, so much of the contemplative, mystical, even monastic ancestry of this art. And without that grounding, the modern astrologer becomes a personality, a content creator, an entertainer, a self-styled guru. Anyone can call themselves an astrologer. No shared standards, no lineage, no rooted structure. Confidence blooms faster than competence. And confidence without grounding is one of the oldest faces of narcissism. So, yes, I see it. I see the sensational thumbnails, this week's biggest shift ever, the most important transit of your lifetime, the open mouths, the wide eyes, the crisis headlines, the endless streams of transformation, transformation, transformation. It looks unintelligent and it sounds narcissistic. And to the outside eye, it probably is. So yes, there is a version of astrology that is shallow, self-absorbed, unthinking, inflated, and overly certain about things that require humility. There is a version of astrology that is exactly what this study describes. There is a version of astrology that even I, someone who loves this tradition with my whole heart, can barely tolerate. And so, yes, there's truth here. But the yes, for me, only applies to astrology at its worst, or to us as human beings at our worst. Even myself at my own worst. And so, we turn the corner. Because there is another answer, and that answer is no. No, astrology is not, in its essence, unintelligent. No, astrology is not inherently narcissistic. No, astrology is not reducible to its shadows. To say yes is to stop halfway. To say no is to remember what lives beneath the noise. Astrology, at its roots, is ancient. It is mystical. It is poetic. It is contemplative. It is philosophically rich. It is spiritually profound. For thousands of years, astrology granted dignity to people who had none, and it still does. It has given peasants the same access to meaning that kings once claimed exclusively. It said, you matter, your life has shape, your fate is part of a larger order, you are not invisible. That is a rich, rich soul inheritance within this spiritual tradition. To call these people unintelligent is to misunderstand intelligence entirely. Because many people who come to astrology come with very little support, very little education, very little self-esteem, very little validation. And my God, if astrology doesn't say there is a sacred pattern here, your life is not random, you are not an accident. Is that narcissism? Or is that dignity? Is that unintelligence, or is that a recognition of the soul's need for a place and for meaning? And beyond that, the people who dismiss astrology as unintelligent often do so, and if you don't believe me, just read the study, from a worldview that cannot imagine a sentient universe, cannot imagine consciousness beyond materialism, cannot imagine that reason is not the center of everything. And what could be more unintelligent than assuming your worldview is the only worldview? What could be more narcissistic than assuming human rationality is the measure of reality itself? So no, No, the real story is more subtle. Many people who feel unintelligent by societal, rational definitions of intelligence carry an intuitive intelligence that academic systems still will not recognize. An intelligence that senses symbolism, an intelligence that recognizes synchronicity, an intelligence that knows the universe speaks even when institutions do not. Many people who appear narcissistic are actually wounded. Their self involvement is a scar, a defense, a way of surviving neglect or trauma. And astrology gives them a place to begin healing. So, no, astrology is not the caricature of unintelligence and narcissism. No, astrology is not simply a self help mirror. No, astrology is not merely the sensational headlines. At its heart, astrology is a contemplative art. And I would say it is a lunar art, a subtle, nuanced, mysterious language, a devotional practice that, when lived deeply, actually decentralizes the ego. Ancient practitioners always said the more you practice, the less obsessed you become with your own chart. That is a particular virtue taught in the Indian astrological tradition, because when you see hundreds of other charts, thousands, and the self relaxes into something larger, your own birth chart becomes so much less of an itch you constantly have to scratch. No, astrology is not inherently narcissistic. And no, people who love astrology are not inherently unintelligent. Most of us are simply human. We're searching for meaning. We're searching for refuge. We're searching for a sacred language big enough to hold our lives. Some of us may not be judged as intelligent by the measures of a very rational, very empirical society. And yet, we may intelligently sense a different kind of ordering, a different kind of reason, a different kind of intelligence at work behind everything. And what's to say that isn't incredibly intelligent to sense when everyone else refuses to acknowledge it? Well, you guys know me. I like to say that two things can be true. Now we come to the end, the only place with enough room to hold everything. Two things can be true. There is narcissism in astrology, and there is profundity. There is unintelligence in astrology, and there is staggering wisdom. There are practitioners who are loud, shallow, reactive, sensational, egoic, ungrounded. There are practitioners who are humble, contemplative, lunar, philosophical, spiritual, serious. The solar realm of astrology is so filled with purpose and courage and self-determination and overcoming and realizing potential. And all of that has a place, but sometimes it's really not serving us. Sometimes it's really not the mode of consciousness we ought to be in. There are students who come to astrology only for themselves, only for purpose, only for empowerment, only for sovereignty, only for all of these things that are just so darn sunny and heroic. And there are students who come to learn a sacred language that slowly, steadily, gently loosens the grip of self-involvement. And both things can be true. We are beings who need purpose, who need meaning, who need the archetype of the hero, and we are beings who constantly need to let go of the hero when it starts to swallow us. That struggle is thousands of years old, and it transcends astrology. When we can hold both, when we can say yes and no in the same breath, we find the nuance that the study lacked. We find compassion, we find intelligence, we find humility, because astrology for thousands of years has always lived between two lights, the sun and the moon. And right now, as a culture, we're flooded in solar consciousness, heroic, purpose driven, self creating, self improving, self helping, self branding. And astrology right now has simply absorbed that excess. We'd be wiser to talk about that excess than blaming astrology for it. What we need now, in my humble opinion, in astrology is the moon. That's one way of putting it. It's just a creative way of putting it. Lunar consciousness, mystery, subtlety, depth, story, the sense that we are one of many, not the center of everything. The moon is the carrier of memory and lineage, reminds us that we are walking a path traveled by thousands of years of astrologers before us. We are not alone. We are not exceptional. We are not heroic. We are part of a living tradition. The tradition is exceptional, and it's exceptional that we get to play a part in it. When astrology is practiced from this lunar place, in my opinion, it becomes intelligent, humble, beautiful. It becomes medicine for the soul that paradoxically grants so much empowerment, deepens our sense of purpose, fulfills our sense of individuality. But we're putting the cart before the horse. And so, yes, astrology has its narcissists, and yes, astrology has its fools, but so does science, so does religion, so does art, so does every human field. Astrology is no better and the worse than the people who practice it, people who are learning, people who are wounded, people who are curious, developing, growing, seeking meaning, seeking dignity, seeking belonging, seeking the sacred. Two things are usually true. More than two things are usually true in any situation. If we can see both the shadow and the light, then we can hold astrology and each other, ourselves, with the compassion and clarity that I think this moment needs. So that's what I think. That's what I think about this study. And honestly, that's more like my just sharing something like a page out of my journal. Sometimes as content creators, we have to search for how to share content that comes from a real place within. I couldn't think of responding to this with a list of rhetorical points, and it just didn't make sense. Maybe it's because I've been doing a lot of writing lately. I just thought to mirror that lunar uh, space of astrology, I thought I'm just going to write. I'm going to write, and then I'm just going to do exactly what I would do if nobody was watching. And it was just me and my journal. It was just me and my writing as my spiritual practice. And then I'm just going to share it with you guys because that's what my relationship with astrology looks like. That's a little page out of my spiritual experience with astrology and how I really process it in my heart. So I hope that's useful for you today and gave you some insights to work with. Check out the study, read through it, see what you think. And if nothing else, maybe we can hold compassion, more compassion for everyone, really, but also, for ourselves and for our field of astrology. All right, that's what I've got. No promotions today. You can find transcripts of any of these daily talks on the website. Don't forget to like and subscribe, all that good stuff. Appreciate all of you, and we will see you again tomorrow.